Hello, my name is Jason Williams, and I am here to give you an overview of several exciting theories and how these theories look when they have been successfully implemented. To begin, you need to have an understanding of the cognitive load theory. In order to understand the cognitive load theory, you must first understand the way in which your memory works. This is known as the architecture of the cognitive load theory. It is founded in the different types of memory that are affected by learning new information. Specifically, when you're exposed to new information, it comes in through either the visual channel or the auditory channel, which is your sensory memory. Once the information enters your sensory memory, it is then transferred to your working memory. It's here that the real work happens. This is where you really begin to make sense of the information. This is where you begin to make meaning by first selecting the relevant information and then taking that information and organizing it into meaningful models. This is what's key for the next step. The next part of the learning process. From here, the final step of the learning process in the architecture begins. Your long-term memory begins to process and integrate the models into your long-term memory by making connections to prior knowledge or by building new connections to solidify the knowledge. All of this processing is where we, as instructional designers, can either make or break the experience for our students. For example, the image that just appeared over here. It has nothing to do with what we are talking about, so it doesn't need to be here. All it did was distract you from the learning. One of the most important jobs we have is to consider all of this processing that our students will be doing, and then we need to try to make it as easy as possible for them. To do this, we need to consider the three types of cognitive load, and more important, we need to ensure that we are minimizing the first two as much as possible. The first and most common type of cognitive load is intrinsic cognitive load. This is the load that is inherent in every learning. It is the load that is applied to the learner simply because he or she is learning something new. This type of cognitive load can be reduced by ensuring that we are not presenting the learner with too much new information at one time. The next type of cognitive load is extraneous cognitive load. This is the load produced by all of the other information being presented to a learner. More specifically, it is the load caused by the way in which we have designed the information to be presented to the learner. Something as simple as adding a relevant text or background music can increase extraneous cognitive load significantly. That is why it is so important that the designer ensure to minimize this type of cognitive load whenever possible. The third and final type of cognitive load is germane cognitive load. This is the type of cognitive load produced by the learning process. If we do an effective job of minimizing extraneous and intrinsic cognitive load, then there will be more than enough load left for the germane cognitive load, which will make it easier for the learner to process the information that is being presented. Now let's turn our attention to the cognitive theory of multimedia learning. This is where I spend the majority of my time each and every day. When I'm creating lessons and resources for associates at the L Brands Care Center, I have to consider how we are presenting the information, because it always contains both imagery and words. Since we are combining these two types of media, it is extremely important that we are judicious when adding information because the potential for cognitive overload increases. To understand this theory, we need to talk about the three basic assumptions of this theory. The first assumption is the dual channel assumption. This states that the human possesses separate channels for processing visual and auditory information. The second assumption is the limited capacity assumption. This states that humans are only able to process a finite amount of information through each channel at one time. The third assumption is the active processing assumption. This states that humans participate in active learning by attending to relevant information and then processing it in a way that will allow it to make meaning and finally link it to other learned information. When faced with multiple types of media, the human brain begins the processes we discussed in the cognitive load theory by first accepting the information through the sensory memory and then processing that information through the working memory. This is all done with the goal of transferring the information into your long-term memory by making meaning of the mental models created in your working memory. As you can tell, this process can be extremely taxing on the learner if we do not take care in the way in which we present the information. Basically, the cognitive theory of multimedia learning is an expansion on the cognitive load theory. And this means that we need to keep the important information up front and clearly defined for our learners. We also need to do everything we can to avoid distractions and make it easy for our learners to be able to find the information that we are presenting. Now let's take a look at three techniques utilizing some of this information to help to ensure that you improve your lessons for your learners. Over the next few slides, I will show you 3 principles discussed in the Cambridge Handbook of Multimedia Learning to reduce extraneous cognitive load and, in turn, increase or deepen your learners' understanding. I'm going to review the following with you: the signaling principle, the spatial contiguity principle, the temporal contiguity principle. The signaling principle is the first of several ways discussed in the handbook to reduce extraneous cognitive load. Specifically, the signaling principle says that you can reduce extraneous cognitive load by providing signals or cues to the learner as a way to highlight the essential information being presented. This will in turn improve the learner's understanding of the essential information. As you can see in this passage, there is just a lot of words on the slide, and it is difficult to easily pull out the essential information. However, if we add a little bit of what we have just talked about in the signaling principle, the passage will be easier for the learner to understand. Let's take a look at what this could look like. As you can see here, the essential information is now easy for the learner to pull out of the passage. The more important details are easily identified by the bold and underlined formatting applied to the text. Now you could read just those portions and tell me a highlight of Wright State's history. The next principle I would like to discuss is all about the placement of the words being used to describe an image or a video. It is the spatial contiguity principle. This is another way discussed in the handbook to reduce extraneous cognitive load. The spatial contiguity principle states that people learn better when corresponding words and pictures are presented near rather than far from each other on the page or the screen. As you can see in this example, the learner is going to have to go back and forth between the information and the image to determine the different areas. This causes a split in the learner's attention and prevents him or her from experiencing a deep level of understanding. This information could be much more effective if the designer applied the spatial contiguity principle. As you can see in this image, the information about the regions is much easier to read and in turn associate with the corresponding area of the U.S. This is just one example of how you can simplify the learning experience for the learner by making the words and corresponding images closer to each other. The temporal contiguity principle is another way discussed in the handbook to reduce extraneous cognitive load. This principle says that people will learn better when the corresponding information and animation are presented simultaneously rather than successively. In other words, the words are spoken at the same time they're illustrated on the animation. As you've probably already noticed, in this slide that is not what has happened. And you might even have found yourself being a little bit thrown off by the animation, or perhaps you're still wondering what information is going to be presented on the slide. So now let's take a look at a better example of this principle. To demonstrate the temporal contiguity principle, I will present information about why this principle works. The temporal contiguity principle says that by presenting the information at the same time it is able to be processed, it reduces the amount of information that has to be stored in working memory. Ultimately, it makes the information easier to understand. One final topic that I would like to speak with you about is a common misconception in my field of retail and customer service. There is a common battle cry among consumers that is often heard by customer service associates. It is the saying that the customer is always right. Is it true or is it false? Well, let's talk about this. To put it simply, the customer is not always right. I have encountered many customers that are completely wrong. For example, a customer who says that we can ship him or her a product which is no longer available. This is just simply not true. If an item is not available, our company does not have a system in place to order one item that we no longer carry in order to send it to a customer. In this case, despite the customer's adamant request, we simply cannot do this, which means the customer is not always right. Oftentimes, customers do not understand the system constraints a company may have, or specifically issues that happen and the things they can and cannot do. This is why it is important that we teach our associates to focus instead on what they can do and ensure they are listening to the customer and responding with empathy. So I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to better understand how you can make your lessons even more effective for you and your students, and to hear a little bit more about me and my experiences. For more information regarding the topics covered here, check out the Cambridge Handbook of Multimedia Learning. Make sure you get the second edition. It has all of the updates. Again, my name is Jason, and thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today.